Andrew, we did it. We made it to a season 2 of our own podcast project. Average person does 7 podcasts and then never does another one. And look at us. We made it into double digits. Thank you so much, Dr. Jasdeep Sandhu, for being our first guest of season 2. I guess no better time to disclose. You have been my therapist for 4 years at least, I believe.
Psychiatrist /
Yes.
therapist, yes.
I mean, I'm happy. It sounds even cooler when I say psychiatrist. So thank you for joining us. And I'm really excited to talk. And we had a conversation beforehand about, when you've been through as much as I've been through, which I've written about and I've talked about, to bring on your own psychiatrist onto a podcast could lead to anywhere. So I'm going to be mindful about where and what I want to open up about. And it's really less about me and my journey being highlighted on this podcast, even though maybe there'll be a time when that would be great. And it's more that I really, and Andrew too, we love talking to people that we can tell they love learning, they love living and they love experiencing and they love, really reflecting on where their life's taken them. And I really have always gotten that sense that you're someone who loves to learn and loves to think about where, I was even brushing up on your About Me on your website that I have not read in years, which I believe is very well written, by the way.
Thank you.
And it was inspiring all over again to kind of think about stuff that we wouldn't necessarily talk about in a session. And I'll tell you this,
because
Andrew,
sessions are about you. That's why.
Exactly. The weirdest thing for me in doing this, and weird is not necessarily pejorative, right? But the weirdest thing for me is every session I do, I'm laying down, like classic, like you'd be on the couch, you'd be like in that position. And so every session, I'm just really only ever used to talking to Dr. Sandhu as like, and I'm adjusting a little bit for audio only listeners. I just like leaned all the way back in my chair. I'm adjusting a little bit to being face on.
This is not therapy. This is a little bit more of a two-way exchange, right?
I hope so. I hope that I don't. Yeah. I hope that when I'm not in the editing booth, I'm not like, oh God, I talked for 90% of the time. I fell right into the comfort of.
I have plenty to say, so
Great.
We can start wherever.
Well, let's officially start. Yeah, so I guess that one of the launching points that I wanted to ask you, and Andrew and I talk about this all the time. We just love connection and organic connection, where we find there's just something that kind of we all find ourselves leading to. But for starting off point, I don't think before I met you, I really didn't have an appreciation for 2 really big things that are connected to why we do the podcast. So that's why I wanted to bring this up, which is the power of mindfulness, but then this idea of non-dualism. And I think that has really affected even like the impetus to say, Andrew, let's schedule time on our calendars. We don't have any advertisers. We're not getting paid for this. We are creating something that we think is beautiful and we're interested in doing. And part of that impetus came from some of the changes I saw in my life once I started to break away from this. I can't diagnose exactly what elements of being brought up the way I was or religion or whatever it was, but very much my comfort zone was like mind and body, and there's like this almost like adversarial energy between the two. So is this something I need to work out in my brain? What's going on in my body? And I am so grateful that because I met you and because of the work I know I've done, I have so much more appreciation for non-dualism and for mindfulness. And that's, I think, just where I wanted to start with you, because I assume that is a really area of passion for you as well.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think, it's not just you. A lot of people are very disconnected from like head, heart, body, spirit, right? And we think that we will figure everything out because we're thinking, but like that's not really where most of our wisdom comes from, or our healing, or even our joy, right? Like if you think about when you're having like the time of your life, are you thinking about it? No, you're like in it, right? And who is in it? Like you in your body, right? Not you in your head. And we sort of forget these things, but there's always like a knowing. And so really when I'm working with people, I'm like find your own knowing again. Like, you know what you're missing, you know what you're capable of, but if you only use your head, like, you won't find it, and you will get yourself into some trouble, like trying to figure out ways to like get this feeling that you know you can have, but you're lacking it because you're disconnected.
I love that. Andrew, open up with me, man. Tell me where you are on the lines of like thinking and feeling and your heart and your brain and your gut. Do you think about any of this stuff? Does any of this sound familiar to you, or are you kind of like just feeling like you're dropped off in a new body of water that you're unfamiliar with the language we're using?
No, definitely. I mean, I think there's a lot of what I've done over the last 3 years in therapy is working on specifically mindfulness and being present. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've always had an issue with is I'm a very curious person, but I'm also somebody who overthinks everything. So as you were just talking, instead of being completely immersed in what you're saying, I can feel like I have to like actively shut my brain down to start going off on these tangents of like, oh, well, I wonder if, or what if I did? And that's one of the bigger things that I've noticed from like Charley sending me clips of the episodes that he's edited. I can see myself visually in some of these going, like drifting off into outer space. And I'm like, okay, how do I reel that back in and stay focused in the moment? And I'd say that's probably one of the key things that I've been trying to figure out is how do I connect all of that to stay present and to really take everything in that I'm experiencing, because that's what I prioritize in my life is experiences and being present or like being in those experiences with others. But
Yeah,
yeah,
like awareness is like the biggest piece, right? And a lot of people don't even know that they're not being present because all they know is like to be in their head. Or again, they get like glimpses of like, oh yeah, that felt good. I'm not sure why. It's because they were present and they weren't in their head so much. And yeah, like you having that level of awareness, whether it's from therapy or just like your own self-reflection of like, oh yeah, like if I'm thinking, I can't be present, right? And the thing is, our brain is so good at this. Like our brain is such a like evolutionary like masterpiece that it's programmed, right? It's made to like think about a bunch of things, make associations, look out for danger, right? Like keep our whole body like running on a cellular level. Like it's doing all these things, right? So it makes sense that we would value it for that and almost like lean into that because we're like, oh yeah, the brain does all these things. So we should just keep utilizing the brain for everything. But then we're really missing out on like what else is available, right? Like what else in this like masterpiece besides our brain are we like not tapped into? And that's when like, okay, how can I be present, right? It's not just like, oh, like shut my brain off. It's like, no, your brain has to be a part of it. But like, what else do you use to get present, right? And like breath is the easiest thing for most people, right? But it's even just like being where you are, like using your other senses. Right. And for some people that's easier, for some people that's harder, but a lot of it is just like awareness and then like choosing to practice something different.
I think that choosing to practice different is such a key part of it because what comes up in me when we think about this, I guess I practice awareness in this conversation in a way that I try to do now at dinner, right? When hosting a podcast, I have all these different parts of me that are coming up. It's my job to be engaging for a hypothetical audience that's watching. It's my job to direct us to an area where we'd have really fruitful conversation, to be mindful that we're 8 minutes in and we really shouldn't go over an hour. There's all this stuff that can kind of lead me away from really being present. And I do this even at dinner. I'll be very much like part of my job at this group dinner is to just keep people involved and create this thing. And what I've noticed changing in a way that I really like is I've kind of done things that I would have made me cringe or would have made me uncomfortable in the past, which is somebody maybe says something really powerful and I allow myself to be like, can we just pause for a second? Or can I just like have a second to think about that or to like sit with something instead of now let's go to my next question, because that feels more like you're being present. And maybe you don't know if there's going to be an quote unquote awkward silence at the table or there isn't something being produced. And I think that would be like, if Andrew and I are on our 5th season in 5 years, I think something I'd be really proud of and be really happy about is I brought that energy, continue to see it even in this format, that I'm not overly thinking about this is really good, or I wonder if we can get a 90-second version of this so I can clip it, and that I keep moving where I can feel myself moving towards, which you could have silence, you could have a moment of uncertainty in an interview with somebody interesting, and that actually could be a good thing and not a thing to feel like I have to plan against. I don't know if that, I think it makes sense to me what I'm saying.
Yeah. And again, it's also like, what are you valuing? And if you're always valuing the next thing instead of what's happening right now, you will miss what is happening right now. And I think that's what often happens, right? People are like, oh yeah, what am I going to say next? Or like, what am I doing tomorrow? Or like, this is my plan for like the next 5 years or the next week. And then it's like, well, then you're kind of missing out on like whatever's happening now. It's very hard to be present if you're like always thinking about what you're going to do next, right? And then yeah, like what a beautiful practice to just be like, oh, how about every time I notice something like special or interesting, I just pause. And it is a practice because we're so used to like just go on to the next thing, go on to the next thing. But then it's also like it's that simple. Like, what if you just paused? Like that's it, like
And
that is you being
feel it,
present.
right? Like try to feel it more. And Andrew, because you were talking about watching yourself in these clips, one of the biggest things I noticed in our episode with Mel when she was talking to us about Alethea was that she's clearly starting to explain how she got into Alethea and how it's helped her with mindfulness. And at some point, if you're watching me, you can see like this light flicker in my eye about I get excited about where I could see something go. And she's taking her time explaining the very end of it. And I cut her off on the very last edge of where she's going to take it somewhere else. And I'm looking at it now, hindsight, going in and being like, oh, I think that she was about to pivot into another layer further. Like she was unfolding, here's the origin of how I got into this, here's how it's helped me do this, and now here's my third thing I want to say about it. But I jumped in at the end of the second thing with this excitement to go somewhere, and I'm not even like upset at myself or frustrated. I don't have anything negative. Yes. And I'm like, that is the thing I think is a really fun practice. I can hold my excitement. About 2.5 minutes ago, I had this question that came up naturally that I want to ask. And I was like, it'll still be there.
That's
I can
patience.
set it.
Practice that patience.
I can set it there. That is very opposite my instincts, So
that's also what people's minds do, right? Your mind is throwing a ton of things at you that you think, oh, I could follow that, or I should follow that. It's like, no, who said you needed to follow any of that? Like if you recognize it is literally your brain's job to like throw a bunch of stuff at you, like you have to be discerning. Like you get to make a choice. What do you follow? What do you put down? What do you look at, right? What do you bring into the present moment? Not like what are you chasing somewhere else that's not present, right? You can have a lot of thoughts and then you can decide like, hey, I want to be really present with this one thought instead of trying to be somewhere else with a thought, because that thought will take you to the past or to the future easily.
My thought that I had was, and I don't think my dad listens. And if he does, I love you. And I would say this with you, but I don't think he listens. But he has recently discovered ChatGPT as far as like really using it, like using it in his day to day. Of course, he knew about it. And I can see the ways that we're alike. I've always found so much safety and feeling of protectiveness in thinking. And I'm a little scared, or my nervous system's getting up. I can feel my heart rate going a little bit. But I can work this out by thinking it through. That's like my superpower. That's my weapon, and that's the thing I'm going to fall back on. Yeah. And what I think is interesting about AI is I see some of these patterns through my dad. My dad's an excellent thinker, and he's excellent at being like, we can work backwards and think, what are the next 7 things we should do? And let's start right now. And now I am getting emails and text messages of copy paste of paragraphs from ChatGPT on any given situation, like on anything that he's interested or thinking about. And there's 2 components to this that I want to ask. It's one, in some ways, AI, I hope, can be really wonderful. And in some areas, I think there's things that are like a little bit worrisome. And one is kind of this deifying or giving authority to whatever the answers are that are given. And 2, how easy it is to access on your own in your own space, which can feel even safer. And so this is really a question for all 3 of us, right? Is our thoughts or any time that's been spent in researching and being interested at all in AI from a mental health angle. And I'll just share one little side anecdote on this. I think it's funny is that we were using it for business needs. My dad was doing research and using ChatGPT for business things. And he wanted to know more about, buying leads, like a new business. I want to go out and buy leads. And so he copy pasted it, but I don't think he read everything in the answer, because half the article was what ChatGPT told me was how to buy leads for the insurance space. Great. And then the second part that he copy pasted was about the lead industry and how to purchase large quantities of lead. And so that is more of a side note of the funnier element of just reading things without thinking about them. But yeah, for either one of you, truly, any thoughts that interest you or that you find interesting out of what I'm talking about when it comes to AI?
I have like major qualms about it, and I've had major qualms about it from the beginning. And I mean, I understand how people could find it useful, but it is overvaluing this function of like thinking and like, I need more information. Who said we need more information? Like, we're already bombarded with more information, like in an hour than most people used to like experience in their life. And clearly, not that much is like getting better. So, one, I think it's like, to use your word, like deifying, information, like knowledge. It's not knowledge, it's just information. And then what do you want to do with that? I think like on a different level, like on a more like global level, it's kind of dangerous because supposedly, right, it's reflecting humanity and like what people are searching and explaining and exploring online and like all the information, right, information we have to date. But do we really want to base like certain decisions off of that, or do you really want some like representation of you like that out there? It's like taking away the creative power of like humans, right? Which I don't think you can replicate. Again, like this is a masterpiece, like we can't replicate it because this is connected to like everything else, right? If you just take the brain, sure, I'm sure like in some ways AI could like figure out like the trillions of neural networks it needs to like mimic it, but it can't match like heart, soul, spirit, ancestral information, right? Intergenerational lineages of like, what does this mean for your specific person sitting in front of you? So, and I think it's dangerous because it can also fall into the hands of who's to say what source is this all coming from? And if people are really outsourcing their own knowing for that information generator, you can brainwash people super easy, right? And it's because people are like, oh yeah, I'll just, summarize this. And it's like, yeah, soon you're summarizing like your life and you can erase your life. Somebody can say you had a different life. Somebody can pin something else. I mean, it's just like, not to be too much of a conspiracy theorist, but like, I don't think people realize like when you put that much power in defining things, like rest assured somebody will want to like define you. And like, why would you give that power away?
Whoa. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Close up
I
shop.
told you
Great
I had
episode.
qualms. I have many
Bit of
qualms.
publishing, sending that clip. That was, oh my God. Yeah. Shit though. Whew. Talking about
Right?
taking a moment to just kind of like, I think I agree with a lot of what you said. Andrew, thoughts about
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the biggest thing for me with AI has always been this sort of like push and pull versus what it gives you versus what it takes away. And that's something that I think I shared an article with Charley a couple of weeks ago about like the dangers of AI and what it does to critical thinking, creativity. And for people who can get online and like, I think the biggest thing for me was like when I was young and coming up in culinary school, the database that existed for these recipes for whatever it was, for the most part, lived in books, and blogging was just sort of coming about. So the easiest way to get this information passed on, or these techniques or these regional recipes, was to go there, experience it, enjoy it, and be a part of it. Well, now I can put into Chat GPT, what are the 3 most common dishes in Bologna, and how do I make them? While that is very efficient, it doesn't do any, like, there's no connectivity with it. And that's what I fear is going to happen, where it's like we become this emotionless information vessel that has no ability to sort of differentiate between what we like versus what we know. And that's what scares me more than anything, is because I feel what I like and the decisions that I've made are because of the experiences that I've had. And that shapes who I am and what I put out into the world. And if all of that is ran through AI, what is left of me? So that part scares me. And I think the way you said it was incredible, because I don't know that I've thought about it that way. But AI is just one of those things that I'm it's endlessly fascinating and terrifying at the same time.
Well, can I add on my scary things on top of the scary things? So
I don't think that's too scary. I'm just pointing out what could happen, right?
Yeah, okay. I appreciate you clarifying that. I will say something that does kind of worry me, but I do think it would be a fun prompt to think about some of the positives that could come from this as well. So I think about what you were just saying, Andrew. I think about how somebody from 70s or 80s, even 90s, might need to go to a physical library working on their thesis, or even their MBA or whatever, and need to have kind of access to a space where even the computer has to have the appropriate abilities to access like LexisNexis, and these other databases and everything. So you need to be somewhere. You need to have the proper access to get large amounts of information that are important for you to get published or to graduate or whatever it is. And then how much has changed in like 50 years and how it kind of happened. So I probably need to go to a physical place I can now do this from home and read these long things, to now I can read kind of like a blog that somebody is going through and maybe diluting or summarizing these large pieces of information, to I don't need to go to a blog because my favorite YouTuber is doing it in 10 minutes, to I don't really necessarily need to go to my favorite YouTuber for 10 minutes anymore because my favorite TikTok person is doing it in 60 seconds. And then this is the final level where something gives me a feeling of unsettled, and I physically have been rejecting it when I see it pop up. I really only use TikTok for like recipes, like researching like cool stuff and being inspired for food and seeing how quickly somebody can efficiently show me all the ingredients and have a little bit of entertainment flair to it. But I am prioritizing time, and should I be? And so I have noticed the next level of it is,
what do you want to do with that time, right? Like prioritizing time is fine, but what are you doing with it?
and here's the part that is the part that gives me the physical rejection, is now I'll see somebody that's doing a great job explaining something very quickly. But they're doing a good job. But then half the screen, I know this has been around for a little bit, half the screen is just something meant for my attention, for my eyes, that has nothing to do with the recipe. Like a video game of two cars banging into each other and almost falling off a cliff, or somebody playing with like a fidget spinner, or there's something that somebody has figured out naturally, immediately, subconsciously draws your eyes to it, but you're still able to hear and listen to the other elements of the thing. Here's why I have the unsettled physical rejection of it, is because it feels pleasing. To me, it feels pleasing to see two screens happen at the same time. It's like I'm processing information from both. I have this like nice, soothing, weird thing I can watch that could not have less to do with the actual thing that's happening on the left side of the screen or the bottom side of the screen.
That's just like novelty and dopamine. I mean, that's very simple. That's why these people can figure it out. Like, oh yeah, just get people to watch it like this, because they're just spiking very quick spurts of that.
And they're seeing that in their views and their everything there. So, but I'm not an expert on any of it. I just know that it makes me deeply uncomfortable. And when I see those videos and I still want to continue to watch the other side of it, I'm physically putting my hand up and guarding the half of the page that's doing like a soothing, distracting thing. Because some part of it like makes me feel as if I'm going to continue to get more and more used to and more wanting.
Maybe you sense that you are like kind of being manipulated.
Yeah. I want to be satisfied with a conversation
we all do.
alone without, hey guys, while we're doing this, I'm going to put on my second monitor something that I can kind of glance over at while we have the conversation.
Right. But I think like to sort of loop this back to the beginning of like connection, like mind-body connection. Who are you connecting to? What are you connecting to? Like all of this is taking people further and further away from connecting to themselves, from connecting to others, from connecting to what's important, right? From connecting to like an actual source of like joy or energy or whatever, right? And like you can use that sometimes, but the problem is like when that's the only way people know how to connect, right? And then it's like, again, what the forces that be, like what are they trying to create? Like a society of disconnected people, right? Because that's easier to control, right? And nobody knows what to do because they're only using their head from the information that they have now been addicted to, right? And like programmed to keep using. So that unsettled feeling you're feeling is probably like some part of you, right? Is like, that's not real. That's not really what I want to be connected to.
I think food has such a big part of this. I'm sure you have thoughts about this, Andrew, because we were talking about this earlier, but I was just happy to eat chicken fingers until I was like 20. And even now, I freaking just love eating chicken fingers, even though I don't eat them nearly as much as I ever used to. But I was, I swear this has a point with what we're talking about, but I have this deification I had of the brain or of thinking in my childhood and my adolescence that I really became like very comfortable with and like very attached to. And it did come at the cost of experiencing things in my body. And that's why I wanted to start the podcast off with that idea of experiencing things in the body. And one of the coolest things that I didn't know, we talked about this in our first season, Andrew and I, we didn't both realize we both were chicken finger boys. We both started there, but then he went on to become an incredible chef and in trying experiencing all these different things. But I think about how food actually becomes this wonderful access point in a lot of ways, you know, and I'll give the extreme example. There was a time where I would have been like the perfect person to market Soylent to, because it's like, just let me be on my laptop. Let me just be working on my email. Let me just work on the next task. I don't want to have the time. I don't want to have to think about what I'm going to eat. I'm happy to just give me 1,000. I see you giving a face of disgust, Andrew, and I'm letting you know I 1,000% would have been the reason that Soylent exists. I am one of those people. And now, I mean, I don't know last time I had Soylent, but I think of it as kind of that similar example of what am I idealizing? What am I worshiping? And then
right? You're valuing efficiency and time, but time to do what? To be more efficient instead
That's
of.
what I was going to come back to. What's that question you asked? What are you doing with that time?
Why not value like your enjoyment, your connection to food, right? Like nourishing your body, like taking care of this like vessel that your head is connected to. Yeah. And I think companies, right, know that people tend to do that. So like how can they capitalize on that, right? But like you have a choice, right? Do you want to be connected to your body or do you want to be connected to like productivity, right? Or like is your worth tied into how you take care of yourself or take care of others, or is your worth tied into something else, right? Then you need all these other false forms of connection.
So Andrew, is it safe to assume that you don't think the invention of coffee Soylent is one of the best creations of the 20th century, 21st century?
I'd say it's pretty safe. Yeah. The one word that I hate, like truly cannot stand being associated with food, is efficiency, because that's what got us into this mess to begin with food, just in general, the food system in America.
Like how food is made, and
it's awful. And you know, being on the production side of it, in terms of like being in a kitchen producing food for the masses, you kind of get brainwashed into going, this is what you have to do to be efficient, this is what you have to do to make money, this is what you have to do to continually produce and to be consistent. And now being on a producer side from the farm aspect, when I hear specifically people in livestock talk about efficiency, what they're talking about is how do we manipulate the natural behavior of an animal to create a more efficient business to then make money. But what you're not doing is you're not treating, you know, animal husbandry goes out the window, but with that goes flavor, efficiency. You know, is that animal living a full life? Like those are things that go completely out the window. Same thing in vegetable production. When you get like pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, all of those things prevent nature from doing what it does best. But when you do that, you mute everything around you. And that's where, when you were talking about getting on TikTok and seeing a recipe, that's where I go like, man, like I would rather you call me and me pick up the phone and go, I'll walk you through the whole recipe, whatever you want to do. Like, let's do it that way. Because the appreciation goes out the window when the information comes that readily and that fast, in my opinion. And that's what I fear is going to get lost, is that like the storytelling aspect of food, or anything that you enjoy for that matter, is that if it's just one click away, always, I fear like that will rob us of the joy of what it meant to find that and seek that out.
Dr. Sandhu, can I share something with you real quick? Anecdote, but I would love to hear what you're going to say, and I can remember my anecdote. So go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say that like I really like resonate with what Andrew is saying, but also like I almost would, the connection to food that people have, like if the soil systems, like the animal like production, all of this is already disconnected and like humans are disconnected from their body, like they're going to accept that, right? And again, I think that's what happens on a bigger level. Like these companies and corporations know if we keep humans disconnected, they will keep eating this food in a disconnected way from disconnected sources. But once people start being like, oh, no, I would like to like see how this actual tomato tastes versus like this, whatever, like greenhouse tomato that tastes like nothing, right? Or like, oh, when I go to a farm and I meet the farmer and like see that what it takes to like kill this cow and like get this beef, like I'm not gonna accept a 99-cent burger, right? But if you keep those things separate, like people are disconnected from their bodies, the food system is disconnected from like nature, people are disconnected from nature, like it works, right? And so if like part of what I like tell people see is like you are connected to the food you eat, you are connected to nature. If you are denying that, right? If you're denying like your own ability to really like enjoy or have health or like pay attention, right? To like what are you consuming and how is it affecting you?
I find that to be an incredibly compelling way to explain that. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So my anecdote was that Andrew said something like, I'd rather you call me and I'll talk you through something. And, you know, a lot of times we'll just say things. I'd rather you this or that. He really would rather that. The other night, Kat and I are hosting. We're trying to host every month, build sustainable, consistent community in our neighborhood, meet our neighbors, meet people. So we host people for a potluck, and I've never cooked ribs before in my life. And I was going to go to TikTok and go to these places. I call him. He's running an event, like a large event with how many people are at your event the other night?
450.
He's preparing food for a huge amount of people. And he answers my phone and he talks me through what to do and why and how to appreciate it and all these different little things to do. So I just couldn't not mention that since it just happened and it was incredibly lovely and kind and sweet. It goes back to what you're saying, right? Of that was an opportunity for you and I to even further bond and have a moment that we'll remember together. That otherwise, yeah, easily could have been put into ChatGPT
right, but
or
like
TikTok.
Charlie, you valued the connection to him, and Andrew, you're valuing like what you can share, right? Like your knowledge and the experience that he's going to have. And like the thing is, you cannot monetize that, right? And you cannot make that more productive. But that is like the essence of very rich life experiences. So do you think about that? No, you feel into that, right? Based on what is important to you.
Something really powerful about just saying that out loud to myself do you think your way through that? No, you feel into that. That I think is almost like a great mantra that I'm going to kind of ruminate
people
on
are like
for a
trying to
little
think
bit.
about, you know, they have a decision, they have something coming up and they're like, oh, I'll think about it. I'm like, feel about it. Don't think about it. Like feel about it.
Feel into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, something I noticed. It's funny how sometimes.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that there's another example kind of that of something I said a lot that a lot of people say. And then once I became aware of it, I'm also now aware of it and others too, which is just like, oh, my brain does this, or my brain just gets like this, so I have to do something. And I think I've done that for a really long time. I think I still do it, but I'm growing awareness of it. So like, what am I actually saying when I go, oh, I need to do XYZ first? And then like Kat will say it, and it's funny. It's like what I'm still judging in myself or trying to like be aware of. Now I'm like trying to like lecture her, tell her like, oh, what do you mean your brain says this or does this? I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. That's the conversation I'm wanting to have with myself. I don't need to like go jump into somebody else first. But I do think that's another symbol of these certain things we use in language that are like colloquial and accepted, but they actually probably tell a lot about ourselves, Definitely. You know? Yeah. Okay. I have a Larry David type thing. Do you know when I say Larry David, do you know what I mean, Dr. Sandhu?
Like Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I have a Larry David thing in the sense of like he's always, you know, upset with some type of social more and criticizing it. So we talked about it earlier. You said something I could not agree more with, which is we already are living in an age where we have so much noise in our lives and so much information that 100 years ago we wouldn't even be able to comprehend the amount on a daily level. So here's my bid, my very podcasty get on a stage bid, but also maybe curious what you guys think about it, is I think that the voice memo text needs to die. I think we effectively killed voicemails, and I'm really happy that we did, except for like the outlier sentimental one. But as a day-to-day utility, voicemail naturally died because it should have. Even when it first came along, right? Like this idea that like I can like when it first came along, it made sense. I can go out into the world. I don't have a phone on me. I can live life, and then I will come back and I will check my messages and I can get back into the world. Okay, cool with it. But now you can access me through so many different things at any point, all the time. Please don't leave me a voicemail. I feel like most people don't. But now, in the last year, and maybe I'm an outlier, people are voice memo texting me. And that means I now like have to take on the job. And this is where you might say, this is something I should reconsider. I'm open to hearing counterpoints from either of you. Something about having to stop and click listen on my phone, where if I even like move my phone one way or the other, it's going to like shut off and I have to restart it. And I have to sit there for like 3 minutes while somebody kind of thinks through or thinks out loud what they want to send to me. I got to tell you, I think that it should be dead, just like voicemail is dead. I would rather be on the phone. Like I would rather
be on the phone. Okay.
Talk back and forth. If we're going to go to that level, let's have an in present mode talking back and forth. The voice memo, I think, is one of the worst texting forms. And I'm glad that I have a recording where I'm able to say it. So
I could not agree more.
Okay.
I was under the impression
alone.
at first when you were talking about that you were like the voice to text feature. And I was like, that is a game changer for me. And I use that every minute of every day. But I have never received a voice memo from somebody. And if I have, I just never played it because I didn't want to deal. I don't know that I've ever listened to one. So I don't share in the discomfort that you had when you did it. But I do share in the idea that I don't want to. I don't want that responsibility put on me from somebody else. And when people send me voicemails or leave a voicemail, I just delete it and call them back. Like, I'm not going to listen to it. I'm calling you back anyway. We can talk about what you needed to talk about in the voicemail, but I'm not taking the time to listen to you tell me what you're going to inevitably tell me when we reconnect.
Mm-hmm.
But that could be the wrong way of doing it.
Is this where we find out that you actually are a frequent user of voice memos?
Yeah, I use them all the time. I love voice memos. I think they're like this efficient little way to actually like hear someone's voice. Like I get tired of reading. I'm bombarded by texts and emails and messages, and you can't get people's tone. And like people are busy, right? Not everybody has caught on to this. Like, let's be really present. And like, can you just pick up the phone and call me for even 2 minutes? So I think the voice memo is like a shortcut to like, okay, let's like try to salvage some vestige of like your voice matters. Because I do think also like, imagine if we were doing this like over email or over chatting, like that would be really weird. Like there's something that gets lost in just words. Like you need voice, you need intonation, you need like, yeah, that's that. I know who that is. I don't need to read anything, right? And when you're like listening, right, you're engaging different parts of your brain than you're reading. Think about how many things you read a day and just ignore, right? It's very hard to dismiss someone's voice.
That is such a good counterpoint that I'm struggling to think of how I would respond other than to wanting to have some culturally agreed upon like deal breakers for voice memos.
Like any form of communication, there's some things that should and should not be communicated. Appropriate. I also agree, like it's not a very efficient, like they could make it a better way to listen to them and do them.
Yes.
And all of that.
Yeah. So on the tech level, maybe they'll make improvements there, and that makes sense. I feel like maybe I've been a recipient of ones that give me the energy for something that they feel too long. And I'm a very sentimental person. So it's the too long element. The energy I get is as if you were going to sit down and like write a letter to somebody. What's happening? You know that once you put pen to paper, it's very hard to change what you've written. So you're taking a moment to really consider and think thoughtfully about what you're going to write to somebody and then put in the mail, which I love. I think that is like a beautiful lost art of sending somebody
just like
a letter. I can just ramble and think through what I would commit to having wanted to have really said. And I feel like you're taking the time and energy that you should be showing out of love for both of us to stop and think, what is the thing I want to say? Now I will record it. That feels like loving and intentional and great. But because you could just send another one and be like, oh, I meant to say this, or I'll just hit play and I'll talk it out and think what it is. There's some element of that casualness that I do not find endearing. And I did not think we were going to talk about this today, but I think some of the points you made, they make sense to me.
I mean, the points
as
you
far
make
as
sense too. It's like personal preference. Like, how do you want to hear someone's communication, right? And like, what do you make of it? Because it's also you're bringing in like this, like, do you value me enough to like text or call or write, right? It's also like you're assigning some like more substance to it when it's coming from someone. That's what it sounds like, right? And I'm assigning a different substance. I'm like, oh, like I want to hear their voice, and like I'm tired of reading what they have to say, right?
that's the part that I think I'll probably be thinking about for like a week or two after this recording, is that if I'm especially my friends who I don't live in LA, there's so many of my friends that are back on the East Coast, so I don't get to see and I don't get to hear. If 90% or more of our interactions are through text, that is the most compelling thing to me, is what am I missing and how does it feel to interact with this other sense and how powerful hearing can be. So that's the most compelling part for me that makes me want to stop and think, you know what, actually. So Stacy's my sister. Stacy's been sending them to me. I will clip this and text it to you. This is me officially saying that I'm reconsidering my policy with you as regards to voice memos. But I would like to get on the phone and talk about how we're going to use them. But maybe there is something about being able to hear your voice and not just deal with it.
And I think
through
just
text.
like texting, there will be developed, just in the social milieu, like, oh yeah, this is like acceptable, this is not, right? Because yeah, I think there's a day where people are gonna be like, if you send me a voice memo over 1 minute, I'm not listening to it.
Answer your face.
People do ramble, but again, somebody might find that rambling endearing. Who knows?
Yeah. I would just much rather have a conversation.
For sure.
And that's just, I've been that way my entire life. Like I'm not great with, specifically, I was actually talking to Charley about this earlier about writing. My ability to write what I'm trying to get across, whether that's a point, like if I'm arguing or not arguing, maybe it's not, but if I'm trying to get a point across specifically in an email with colleagues, I can't tell you how many times I'm screaming out loud trying to get what's in my head into the keyboard and onto the email that never translates correctly. So it's like, if I have a lady that works with me that every time we communicate, there's this combative nature to it, because to your point, there's no tone in a text message or an email. So after like 25 emails, I'm beyond frustrated. And I pick up the phone. I'm like, can you please just call me? Whenever you have a question about anything, I don't want to do it through email. I don't want to do it through text. Just call me. And she's like, oh, I didn't know you wanted to be called.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well then I will communicate better on my end and I will let you know my preferences.
Right.
But
and some people are like better verbal learners, auditory, right? Visual, like the same with comprehension. Like we all just have our different ways that we understand the world and the people around us. So
I was just thinking in my head, Andrew, of this, like the full body scanners. They're like, come in and pay, and we'll do a full body scan, and we'll like look at your whole body. For some reason, I was imagining like this like full communication scan where like a doctor gets in front, and it's like, there's some good things here. I've noticed that you actually you like to go on walks and talk with people more than the average person. I think that's really healthy for you. But it does turn out, looks like 85% of all communications that you are currently participating are through text, and that's really we need to lower that number. Like I'd be talking to you about your blood pressure, and I joke, but also like I mean, it's got me thinking a little bit. Like, we are inundated with text.
Yeah, it's just like another way. Like, how do you know yourself better, right? To make your life more easeful or meaningful, right? Like, why would you force yourself to like, for example, like sing everything when you know you can talk, right? Like you don't need to force yourself. You just need to know you prefer talking to singing, right? Or like, why would you try to make yourself write out every single thing if like that's not how you learn, right? Why would you do that? That's not, so it's really like knowing yourself and then being able to like communicate that to other people. You could never have to listen to a voice memo again if you are like very clear about like why and like what that means to you and how your brain processes it and like what type of connection you want with people. I mean, that's like a way to establish a boundary, but like you have to know that for yourself.
Yeah, knowing oneself has turned out to be a quite fruitful endeavor, I will say.
Yeah, instead of waiting for somebody outside of you to tell you, right? You just know yourself.
Yeah. Andrew, I've got all types of stuff that I'm curious about and love to talk about, but I did want to give you a chance. You're 40 minutes in. I'm so happy with what we've just stumbled upon.
Yeah.
Did you have anything in particular that you wanted to talk about today?
Two things. One of them came up while we were talking, and another one was just a curiosity of mine that I had. And I'll start with that, which was Charley had shared with me before you came on the About Me on your website. And one of the things that I read on there was lifestyle medicine. And I know we've already kind of talked about that to a degree, but that's something that was super intriguing to me when I read it. Was like, well, what is that? How is that defined? What does that mean? How do you convey that to people? And how do you know where that's applicable? And I don't know if that's too much to put into a response, but yeah,
I mean, I could
that's
speak
it.
like, broadly to that. Everybody defines it differently, but when I think about like medicine and practicing like the science and art of medicine, instead of this narrow frame of like there's disease, there's symptoms, there's disease, and there's like something to fix, that like really also narrows your options of like how are you going to address like what is really bothering this person or like throwing them off balance or like causing some sort of disruption in their life. And lifestyle, right, is just like, okay, like how do you live your life? But there's so many things people don't think about, again, because we're kind of like told, like, this is just how it is. This is how the food system is. This is how much stuff costs. Like, this is how you communicate, whatever. But if you actually think about like, what are you doing? Like, how are you living, right? Like, what is like how are you like moving about the world? How are you conceptualizing the world? What are you consuming, right? What are you like, how's your energy balance happening, right? Like, is your energy high in one area, low in another area? So like lifestyle medicine can be, some people lifestyle medicine is just like, yeah, food, nutrition, like sleep, like very biohacky, right? Like if I get my macros like this, and if I get my sleep like this, and if I get under an infrared, and if I, like go in nature and do this and like that's great, right? That's a piece of lifestyle medicine. And then I think sort of what I more focus on is like this whole integrative approach. It's like all that stuff is important, right? Like you have to understand biology and like how is your body connected to your mind, right? And like your nervous system and like your organs and like your gut as your second brain and like all those things are super important. But if you stop there, you're still very much in like a Western medicine, and lifestyle medicine often still falls under that. It's just a little bit more thorough. But if you're thinking, what am I besides this brain? What am I besides this body, right? Like what frequency am I resonating with? How am I understanding like the world around me and my place in it, right? Or how am I understanding my family or my society or my culture? Like what is the spiritual meaning of like me living on this earth? And like what am I doing here? All of that impacts our health. Again, because this body is just a body, like what is inside of us, right? And so when I talk to people about like lifestyle medicine, yeah, we can get like super nerdy on like that type of stuff. Or if people really want to like get into mindfulness, right? That's like, okay, that's like the next step outside of your body. Like, how are you feeling connected? How are you being really present? But then it's like, what do you actually think this reality is? And like, what is your role in it? Like, why are you here? And people don't realize like how much illness comes from this like lack of meaning they have in their life, and they're looking for meaning everywhere, and they're really trying to use their head, and it's like this is why you're sick, right? This is not where it's going to come from. So that's sort of a long
I love this. I love this
long
so
answer.
much.
Yeah.
I love this
My,
so much. So okay. This is why I'm like really having a strong response to it, and I'd love to hear yours to this. Is we've come up with so many cool modern tech things to give us so much data
Yep.
to help us be a better machine.
Exactly. Right.
And then you read some wonderful writers, brilliant thinkers that are on Earth right now. They're inspiring, that are really smart. And I'm now tracking how many of them go east and tap into 2,000, 5,000 years of really interesting things. And then when they come back, their basic thesis, to paint with a broad brush, is, yeah, there's some really incredible stuff that people have known for a really long time that can help me be a better machine. But I'm not, we don't have to hold on to the woo stuff we can just take these certain elements that they happen to figure out because they maybe just happen to understand or play around and then write and have oral history lead them to what they can do through breath work and through these things. And
Right.
now I can get an even better, if you do these things, you can get an even better read on your Aura ring or on your watch or whatever it is. And I think that I just had that come up in me of like, that feels wait, it's not just about getting better readings on the machine, you know, like I want to be about love.
Yeah.
And I want that to be known that that's not overly saccharine or sentimental, but actually that it's quite powerful. And I just could not agree more about even when my hair started to go gray and recede, and I know that could have all different biological stuff, and I was getting sick a lot of the time, and I had, you know, like my most depressive bout, stress was so high, and now I feel so well older, like I'm 36, and probably when I felt worse was maybe 27, 28. Now I feel so much better. And am I drinking less? Sure. Am I eating a little healthier? Sure. But in a lot of ways, a lot of the things are very similar as far as activity or just different parts of my life. Stress is easily the thing that's got to be like the lowest then since then. Anyway, obviously.
Because stress throws everything off, right? And what is stress? Stress is normal, right? Like our body is built for stress. What our whole system is not built for is like living out of alignment for a very long time. And that's part of what ails most people in the West, especially, is like everyone is living out of alignment and only wanting to try these things, like you said, to keep the machine working. But half the problem is like they're trying to align themselves into a machine. We are not machines, right? We are these like big, spiritual, expansive, energetic beings who just happen to be in this body right now. So if you only want to take care of the body, I don't know how far you're going to get, right? And if you're thinking about, well, what is this stress? Perhaps the stress is coming from living in a way that's not actually, you're trying to like fit a square peg into a round hole, right? Of course that's stressful. Like your soul knows that, right? But your body is like, well, let's just try harder. That's going to create a lot of imbalance in your system. And that's what's very different between West and East. Like West is happy to keep thinking of you as a machine, right? And keep like inputs, outputs. Other forms of medicine are like, no, if you think like you are just this one container and we can just like wrap you up in a little bow and everything's fine. Like, no, that's not how health works. Your health is the health of the tree, is the health of the soil, is the health of your grandma, is the health of the water. That's your health. So you can't be
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Andrew, I wanted to hear the other question was, or your just thoughts on that, but I just wanted to say one more time, there's just a deep, I don't know if it's frustration or also find it dealing with it in humor or whatever it is, but just this thing I continue to see of like, I went to Nepal and I found this beautiful, wonderful, lost, like incredible truth about humankind. And I've come back to now apply it to how we can have a better like machinery, like element of, you know, more production in our body. And like, that's the thing that you brought back and that you valued and like mining from what you witnessed.
So why does that bother you though?
I'm sure, first off, I don't know. Okay. Second, realizing it's so nice to be able to say, I don't know. Second, I would suspect that there's something, self-judgment or self-concern about myself that then comes out of that. You know, what is it that I miss the bigger picture on something, or am prioritizing too much something that doesn't nearly fill me up with love and a sense of connectedness.
Right.
You know?
You're seeing people sort of miss the message and promote what they want from it. And yeah, like for you, that could be very unsettling, right? For them, they think they've just like found some golden treasure, right? But if you really, again, take this being as like, what are they here to do? Maybe that's what they're here to do. Maybe they're here to like little by little bring information over, right? We don't know. That's why we can't really judge people on these paths, right? We don't know why they're here, what they're doing.
Yeah, it's a great reminder to say I'm trying out these breath strips, so I have tape over my mouth, and I'm like on day 6 of sleeping with tape on my mouth.
No more mouth
from
breathing.
Breathwork, from Breathe by James Nestor. Very light tape. My mouth is never in danger. I can open my mouth with it on. Just qualifier. Do not put tape that you can't open your mouth on your mouth. And the thing is, why? And okay, because I should sleep better. Okay, so because why? Because it gives me more energy and I feel better. Why? And that's where I can center it back on myself and say, oh, because I want to have more grace and more love and more energy with my fiance, with the people. I want to feel, more full, because I know how that can extend and what that can build in my life. And so I think doing that is not something I always do. So it's like a nice, gentle reminder to say, like, play the tape out, take it a little further. Why are you trying this weird, fun little sleep technique? For what eventual purpose?
Yeah. And I think we don't know, right? Like some of these biohacker people, like I make fun of, like some of them probably are very like deep spiritual people. And this is the way they're honoring this vessel, right? They're really trying to take care of this machine because they know it's for a higher purpose, right? And maybe that's giving some people more credit than it's due, but I think that is also part of it, right? Because to like take care of this body, right, is not because you're like obsessed with this body. It's because in order to access this and connect to this and connect to intuition and then go do what you're supposed to do in this world, you have to use this body, right? And the lessons you're learning in this body, like that's the whole point. Like listen to your body. It's not because your body is some like machine or because like everything revolves around the body, but it's like a piece of it, right? Like I can't talk to you sitting here if I don't like have this apparatus. Is it my body that's talking? No. It's like my soul, right? Like that's what I believe is this is just like costume. And it's like this for like one moment in time that I get to like use it and talk like this.
You got both eyebrows raised from Andrew on that one, like a fool.
Yeah. I don't know that I've ever drawn a line between uncertainty of why I'm here and health.
Oh, yeah.
Ever. Because for the longest time, and I think Charley and I are similar in this based on our upbringings. I think his was way deeper than mine was, but very quickly, as I was actually sent to a Southern Baptist school when I was in 7th grade as a punishment. So like my connection to the world of religion and spirituality has always been very much associated with this very dark, very like I've done something wrong thing. So I've never had that connection, and I've always just kind of been on the other side of it. But I've always used that as like that's not me, I'm not a spiritual person. But hearing you say that uncertainty and why I exist, why I'm here, why I'm on this journey is connected to, be it unhealth, unsettling, whatever. I don't know that I ever would have made that connection. And I'm trying to be present, but my brain keeps like
Andrew,
wanting to chase that rabbit.
My God, dude, It is one of the greatest things I am been working on over the last like 4 or 5 years is exactly that. Is that my experience with Southern Baptist evangelicism, the specific strain I was in, because once again, there are people that are very happy and full of love and are good neighbors that have some different beliefs than me. But what I was in was a fear of the world and a belief that I was a bad self at the core that needed constant redemption and forgiveness to ever feel worthy of anything, right? That's what I deeply, truly did believe. And as I broke away from that and started to try to believe in a sense of self-acceptance and self-love, and what if at the core of me, I'm good, what still remained was almost like an immune response, like white blood cells just rushing at the word soul, rushing at the phrase spirituality to be like, no. Nice try, doctor. I've been there. I've seen what they've done to me and to others. I'm good.
Right. But the difference is, right, is what you can learn is instead of looking outwards for this information and this definition and what you're supposed to be doing and why, you look inwards, right? If you're thinking, like, what is the difference between religion and spirituality? One is saying, look outside of yourself. One is saying, look inside yourself, right? And not all religion, but, it's very easy to be like, oh, that set of rules and those set of people, I'll do that, right? And when I run into problems in life, I'm going to blame everything outside of me because I learned to look outside of me instead of being like, oh, perhaps there's something inside I am missing.
Yeah, and that's where the fear was for me, Andrew, and still sometimes is, because it's very human to have that fear. Is that
and it's also remember who would benefit from you being afraid, right?
Well, that's a huge part of it. And that's, but fear was, if I look inward, what would I find? But if I think of myself as a machine, or I think of myself as my brain, and my brain does this, and my brain does that.
Gathering information. It's not going to save you.
I'm not bad at my core if I'm a machine.
Right.
I'm just a machine. And so I traded something away for a sense of safety, and to be able to come back now and rethink this and go, wait a minute, what I traded away was maybe actually quite central to the human experience because of the pain that I felt. And so living as a machine is not better than living without a soul and being afraid. And, this is a whole other side conversation that I don't really know we have time to go into, but it is part of my list of 47 things I can ask you about, and maybe be able to bring you on again, which is that it really probably wasn't until I did ketamine-assisted therapy, which we talked about on the podcast before, but was assisted by you, right? It was this feeling that it was with no judgment or any emotion attached to it, just a very clear, of course there's nothing bad at the core of me. Like, it's, how could there be? But without any big passionate, I am good at the core of who I am and there's nothing bad. It was just kind of like, well, I'm looking at the sky, it's blue.
Yeah.
All right, what do I want to think about
you
next?
Realize what gets piled on the truth inside, right? And then you become brave enough to look inside and be like, oh, I don't want those things. That's not my truth. It's covering up what is true, right? Whether that's family conditioning, environmental toxins, religion, whatever. All these things like murky what is true for you. And it's really, and it's not that complicated. Like, and I have to sort of be mindful of like how and when I present things to people, but like if on the first day you had walked in, any patient, right? And I'm just like, really, it's all about love. And like, once you figure that out, you'll be okay. Like, people would run out the door because it's also super scary to think like, what if that's all you are, right? And what if it was that simple? Like, what if you didn't have to be afraid? What if you could just be a loving person, right? But we get sort of conditioned to like not trust that. And so this process of like relearning yourself and like maybe not looking outward so much, right? And like connecting to yourself and connecting to what actually matters to you, then you can more easily arrive at this, oh yeah, I'm good. Like, I'm good. I'm love. I'm good. I can take care of my body. Like, but okay, I'll do that.
I love that you use the word brave going back, because I think where I was coming at this from until you said that was like, looking for again, we're talking about inside versus outside reasoning. I was looking for like, what is the outside reason to look inward? And if the spirituality and the benefit of that from what I'm used to comes from external validation versus this internal feeling of curiosity and bravery to see myself for who I am, that reframe, I don't know if it's open, I don't know where I'm at with it, but it's changed now how I think about it. Because if that's the obstacle, is my own willingness to do the work and to go down that road, then the only roadblock is me, and it's nothing outward. So then why would I not find that? If I truly am a curious person, like I stated at the beginning of this episode, why would I not follow that road to its end?
Yeah. Agreed. I think curiosity is like an amazing like superpower that we just underutilize.
And I mean, part of this is because I just edited Mel's episode, but it's where I love that she talked about trailheads for mindfulness. And that's where that curiosity, I think, finds these really natural starting points. It doesn't have to, like, my instinct would have been to come up with like a 100-page report on how I'm going to get curious about myself. Like, I would just overpowered, like, it is something to do. Right. Being is something to do, and now I've realized like the trailhead terminology is so great because you can become mindful as things present themselves in your gut and then your heart and then your head. You can realize like, oh, just like if I was hiking, that could be an interesting thing to go and feel into.
Many
Andrew,
we could talk about.
Did we hit the second thing that you wanted to talk about, or was there something else that you wanted to be able to?
Yeah. So the second thing is something that's it's kind of tied into this, because we were talking about like going back in time and what it was like in the 70s and 80s and then how that connectivity has changed. And I was listening to somebody talk recently about if you were to go back to the early 1800s, what would you take with you from a knowledge standpoint to share with people, knowing that you can't go and be like, there's this device that I can't explain to you in theory, but it has everything on it. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So, like, what is the thing that you go back and you do in that time to bring just what, you know what I'm saying? Like, where would you take that? What would you focus on? Is it like the internal combustion engine? And then it's like, well, is there a blacksmith that can actually forge this to make things more efficient? Probably not. And that's been like plaguing my mind because like I think there's a lot of ego involved in that in terms of like, well, if I go back and I do these 1, 2, 3, or 4 things that will, you know, expedite this, or like that's like the grandiose image in my mind of like, where can I advance society?
First of all, I think I was thinking it the other way around. I was like, oh yeah, what would I want to bring from the 1800s? But I'm like, I don't think I'd want to tell the past anything from the future. I was like the opposite. I was like, oh, and then I was like 1800s, like let's go back to like 2000 BC. Like I want to ask like, you know, people in the Indus Valley, like what were you doing about like malaria or something, you know? Like I think there's so much wisdom in the past. Like who are we to be like, hey, the way we do it is better? I mean, even in like our lifetimes, right? We see that with like developing countries and like from wars or just like people we don't understand. And we're like, oh, do it this way. It's better. It's like, how do you know? So I would give zero things to people in the 1800s, even like 50 years ago. And I think it's because like society, people, like we're evolving in the way we're supposed to evolve. Like, why would you throw a wrench in that, you know? But I think there's a lot we can learn from the past. And because history repeats itself, I don't think we need to like concern ourselves with like, you know, giving anything to the past. We're already doing that in a way. Like stuff is repeating. But I've always been like super fascinated to be like, oh yeah, what would it have been like to have been trained as like an Ayurvedic doctor like 1,000 years ago, right? And like also what must they think about this is how you guys practice medicine? You guys like don't teach them anything about breath work or like trauma or about, you know, like their connection to their ancestors. That would be like anathema to them. They would be like, there's no way we can qualify you to give anybody any sort of help. Like you don't know what you're talking about. So I totally misunderstood your question and didn't answer it, but I just went off in my own direction.
No, that's exactly
how is that
right.
not an incredible answer? That's such a great answer. Nothing.
Well, that's part of that.
I would tell them nothing, Andrew.
I'd be like,
that's part of,
like,
and we'd all be more content and joyful because of it.
Yeah. And that's part of that thing that's been like plaguing me. Like I've been thinking about this for a while. It's like the ego side of me going back is like, what impact will I have versus going back and being like what we talked about, being present in that time and taking that time in for what it is. And then what can I take to the future that maybe we've forgotten that we need to connect with? I think that is a much better way of looking at it from the sense of like, how are we missing who we are at our core because of all of the distraction that we have in our day-to-day life now? Yeah. Charley.
Hurts my feelings a little bit that you don't want to know what I would do if I went back in time.
I mean,
I do want to know. That's why I just Charley.
Okay. Here,
let's go.
I'm just making a note to edit that cynicism out. I don't know. I probably just want to try to bring from, it's like Back to the Future. It's like a weird, I'd probably try to bring from now to whenever I was, whatever I thought inhibited like the most silliness and fun and joy and connection from like a little kid standpoint. So, because that's kind of like part of my journey has been, and we talked about this with the evangelicism and everything, is if I'm bad at my core, maybe I can do enough to be okay. Not even to be good, but like maybe I could just do enough. So then like everything kind of revolves around how much good can I do? And then the more access to knowledge and data, maybe that can tell me that I can figure out the goodest of the good I can do with the most efficient of my time. So that version of me would have been like, I need to figure out whatever a cure is right now that's pretty easy. You know, I need to be like figure out penicillin or figure out some of these things, and boom, I will have gone back and I will have saved all of these lives. That is the only answer. You're welcome, right? And now I don't think about it that way. Now I'm like, well, what if I don't need to do anything? This is a fun hypothetical of us thinking and feeling what would bring me the most joy. And maybe there's like some element of something that I don't even know what it is, but it would be about connection and silliness and fun. Maybe I'd bring a sport. that I love, to see whether or not at that time they could get around, like get invested or pick up on the sport that I love from now, right? Like be the first one to introduce basketball because I love
You would share an
basketball.
experience or like a feeling or like something novel, that adds
That
like
brings people
joy,
together
yeah,
and
and brings
connection
people
and
together.
joy.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. I feel like those
And
questions
then
just
an
lead with, like,
American will have invented basketball, even though America will not have been a concept, and it won't be a Canadian. And then I'll feel even better about that.
I was just gonna say this question's like a really good like test of people's like ego strength and like what they really think matters, right? Like if someone's immediately like, oh yeah, I would do this and this and this, and it's like, I don't know, to me, I'd be like, I feel like you're missing the point. Like maybe you don't need to bring anything back. Or maybe it's like you're using it as like, oh, well, I would have said this 5 years ago, but like now I think differently about like what I actually bring to the table, right? Past, present, future table.
Yeah.
Interesting
Cool.
question, Andrew. Yeah.
Thank you for the question, Andrew.
Yeah.
This was so wonderful, and to your own interest in the future, I feel like it could be fun to, depending on like a theme or something else. I felt like there's so many other things we could have
Sure.
talked about that also. But I mean, I truly, this is one of the most enjoyable hours I've had, and I think an incredible way to kick off our second season of interviewing people we know that we're curious about, that we
So
want to
glad
learn
you
from.
invited me, and I'm happy to
Yeah.
also like connect with Andrew and meet somebody else who's thinking about, sort of how to be more connected, how to like
Yeah,
live
we're
more
more like
fully.
feeling into how to be more connected, but we
Feeling
think too.
into it. You're
Yeah.
correct. Yes. Thank you.
Oh, this is great. Okay. Any parting thoughts from you, Andrew? You good?
I'm good. It was an insane conversation that went in a lot of directions that I was not anticipating. But I'm glad this is recorded and I can go back and listen to it time and time again.
Same. It's going to be a wonderful experience. Thank you both, and hopefully look forward to doing this again sometime.
Sounds good. Thank you guys.